Lasting roughly from the end of the American Civil War in 1865 to the turn of the 20th century, the Wild West era has long captured the popular imagination. Many of us are fascinated by the clash of old and new that characterised the time, while for others, the Wild West has simply become a byword for lawlessness and banditry. In a region where no real judicial system existed and disputes were often resolved by deadly duels, the American frontier became a breeding ground for criminal gangs who robbed steam trains and banks, rustled cattle and killed lawmen. Morphing over decades into the heroes and villains of folklore, these men and women have become the hallmark of the period. Here are the real stories of 5 of the most famous and notorious Wild West outlaws. Jesse Woodson James was perhaps the most famous American outlaw, bank and train robber, guerrilla and leader of the James Younger Gang. Born in 1847 and raised in Missouri, James and his slave-owning family maintained strong Southern sympathies. After the horrors they witnessed fighting in the American Civil War, Jesse and his brother Frank soon became disenfranchised outcasts who, after the conflict had ended, wanted to take the money back from those in control. As the leader of the James Younger Gang, Jesse James played a pivotal role in a successful string of train, stagecoach and bank robberies. Ironically, he was and still is often looked at as a sort of Robin Hood of the Old West, but there isn't much proof at all he ever gave back to the poor community. The James legend grew with the help of the newspaper editor John Newman Edwards, a Confederate sympathiser who perpetuated James's Robin Hood mythology. "We are not thieves, we are bold robbers," James wrote in a letter Edwards published. "I am proud of the name, for Alexander the Great was a bold robber, and Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte." Unimpressed with these claims, in 1881 the governor of Missouri issued a $10,000 reward for the capture of Jesse and Frank James. On the 3rd of April 1882, at the age of only 34, James was shot in the back of the head and killed by one of his own accomplices, Robert Ford, who was found guilty of murder, but eventually pardoned by the governor. Usually a nickname like the Kid would not be associated with someone who earned such a rough reputation, but Billy managed to pull it off. Born Henry McCarty in 1859, likely in New York City, Billy experienced a turbulent childhood. His father died at the end of the American Civil War, and his mother contracted tuberculosis around the same time, forcing his family to move out west. Billy's transition into the life of an outlaw began in 1877, when he drew his gun and shot a civilian blacksmith who was bullying him at Camp Grant Army Post in Arizona. McCarty was held in custody in the camp's guardhouse, awaiting the arrival of the local marshal. Before the marshal could arrive, however, Billy escaped. Now an outlaw on the run and unable to find honest work, Billy the Kid met up with another bandit named Jesse Evans, who was the leader of a gang of rustlers called the Boys. Billy had nowhere else to go, and since it was virtually suicide to go solo as a wanted man in the hostile and lawless territory, Billy reluctantly joined the gang. After engaging in numerous felonies and later becoming embroiled in the infamous Lincoln County War, Billy's name soon spread across tabloid newspapers. With a $500 reward on his head, the fugitive was eventually gunned down by New Mexico Sheriff Pat Garrett on the 14th of July, 1881. It's not often that a rich girl abandons her comfortable city life to become an outlaw, but Belle Starr was far from ordinary. Born in Missouri to a well-to-do Confederate sympathizing family, Myra Maybelle Shirley Starr, later known as Belle, and eventually the Bandit Queen, was only a teenager in 1864, when outlaws Jesse James and the Younger Gang used her family's home as a hideout. In the years that followed, Starr would go on to marry 3 different outlaws: Jim Reed in 1866, Bruce Younger in 1878, and Sam Starr, a Cherokee, in 1880. It was from this point Belle was said to act as a front for bootleggers and harbour fugitives. She was also convicted of theft on numerous occasions. Her life in crime ended, however, when she was shot in the back. Legend has it by her own double-barreled shotgun as she returned from a general store to her ranch. She died on the 3rd of February 1889. Those suspects included an outlaw with whom she was feuding, a former lover, her husband, and her own son. The killer of Belle Starr has never been identified. Born Robert Leroy Parker in Beaver, Utah on the 13th of April 1866, Butch Cassidy was the first of 13 children. His Mormon parents had come to Utah from England shortly before the Civil War. He certainly came from humble beginnings. It is likely that by 1884, Roy was already rustling cattle. However, in 1889, he and 3 other men, including Harry Longabaugh, aka the Sundance Kid, committed the first crime attributed to his name: a bank robbery in which the trio made off with $20,000, a small fortune in those days. This robbery showed the trappings of what would become the Wild Bunch's signature hold-up, a well-planned attack. After this daring heist, Butch and his followers went on the run, travelling all across the frontier. The Outlaws held up banks and trains in South Dakota, Wyoming, New Mexico and Nevada, and managed to bring home increasingly larger sums of money. An estimated $60,000, for example, for the single hold-up of a Great Northern train in Montana in 1901. Almost $2 million by today's standards. However, by this point, the good old days seemed to be over. The Wild Bunch had an army of law officers and Pinkerton agents hunting them down. With the authorities hot on their trail, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid fled to Argentina. Eventually, however, Cassidy went back to doing what he did best: robbing trains and payrolls. He did this up until his reported death in a mass shootout in 1908. One of the only known female stagecoach robbers in US history was an Old West cowgirl named Pearl Hart. Born in Canada in 1876, the 19th century outlaw was best known for committing one of the last ever recorded stagecoach robberies in the United States. Dressed as a man with her hair shorn, Hart armed herself and set out with her accomplice Joe Boot. The pair decided to rob a stagecoach that travelled between Globe and Florence in Arizona. The robbery occurred on the 30th of May 1899 at a watering point near Cane Springs Canyon, about 30 miles southeast of Globe. One of the last stagecoach routes still operating in the territory, the run had not been robbed in several years, and thus the coach did not even have a shotgun messenger. The pair stopped the coach, and Boot held a gun on the victims, while Hart took $430, equivalent to roughly $13,000 today, and 2 firearms from the passengers. After returning a generous $1 to each passenger, she and Boot rode quickly away. Accounts of the next few days vary. According to Hart, the pair took a route designed to lose anyone who followed whilst they made their future plans. Others claim the pair simply became lost and started wandering in circles. Regardless, after days of evading the local sheriff, Hart and Boot were eventually caught sleeping and taken into custody. The Bandit Queen was charged with stagecoach robbery and issued a 5-year sentence for her infamous crime. The novelty, however, of a female stagecoach robber quickly spawned a media frenzy, and national reporters soon joined the local press, demanding an interview and the opportunity to photograph Hart. Locals also became fascinated with her. Pearl Hart would go on to perform reenactments of the horrors she faced within Yuma Territorial Prison, in her own show, performing under an alias in the famous Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. So there you have it, folks, our list of the top 5 most notorious outlaws of the Wild West. Let us know who you'd like us to cover next, and remember to subscribe to History Hit for more top 5 videos.
Check out the History Hit YouTube, where you can get great exclusive videos and a sneak peek at what's available on the world's best history channel, History Hit TV. It's growing really fast. We're thrilled to have you all aboard.